Today we are learning about the Peloponnesian War that takes place in ancient Greece. Before we learn this new information, we're going to do a quick review over the Persian Wars that happened just prior to the Peloponnesian War. So, first question to answer here on this Ed puzzle, who was fighting during the Persian Wars? What was one of the causes or the reasons that the Persian War begins? In the end, who is it that won the Persian Wars? Which of the following was a consequence or outcome of the Persian Wars? Now we're going to get into the Peloponnesian War. So what is the Peloponnesian War? A short definition is this: Sparta and Athens went to war for control of Greece. Throughout our lesson today, we're going to find out the details on this information, but before we start, let's go over who Athens and Sparta were. Remember, they are both city-states in ancient Greece, but they were very unique. Athens had a democracy as their form of government, which means that the citizens were able to vote for laws and leaders. Sparta had an oligarchy, which means rule by a few. We learned that they had 2 kings, and then they had 5 ephors who ruled, who kind of had control as well to ensure that the kings did not overstep their power. Oligarchy means rule by a few, and these few powerful men had control over Sparta. For their economy, Athens focused mostly on trade. We also learned that they were involved in tourism. Part of this is because of their location near the water. They're located on the coast of the Aegean Sea, and they are able to access these waterways easily. People would dock their ships in the ports near Athens, and this made them a valuable trade partner. Sparta, on the other hand, focused on agriculture, meaning they used farming, and they were pretty self-sufficient. They relied on their own city-state for all of their needs. Athens had a culture that valued the arts and academics. We've looked at the different architectural features of Athens, where we see the beautiful temples and the columns that they're very famous for. They are famous for their plays and theater that were happening during this time. There are many philosophers that we're shortly going to be learning about who were from Athens. So they're focusing on the mind and learning and things, works of beauty and art in Athens. In Sparta, on the other hand, they're focusing on military power and strength. We learned from the Battle of Thermopylae in the Persian War that these people are not only focused on strength, but it almost seems as though they have a sense of real loyalty for their city-state, where they will do anything to protect their people. Relationship to the outside world. We haven't really discussed this much, but this is important here. Athens is open to world ideas. We can see evidence of that because of their trade. If they're open to trade, that means that they're going to be interacting with other groups of people regularly. Sparta, on the other hand, is a little bit more isolated. They kind of keep to themselves. They are self-sufficient. They don't really rely on other people or other city-states or civilizations to give them anything. And then we learned at the end of the Persian War that some of these city-states began to create alliances with other city-states so that they would be protected. They were afraid of being attacked by a large empire like the Persians again, so they teamed up to ensure that they could be safe. Athens is part of a membership or a league called the Delian League. Eventually, they become very powerful and almost take over the Delian League, where they are in control of it, which we'll talk more about shortly. Sparta is part of a league called the Peloponnesian League because of their location on the Peloponnesus. All right, so let's get into it. After the Persian Wars, The Battle of Plataea in 479 BCE put an end to the Persian invasion of Greece. Although the Persians retreated, they still remained a threat. In 478 BCE, Athens joined with other city-states, but not Sparta, to form the Delian League. The Delian League promised to defend its members against the Persians. It also worked to drive Persia out of Greek territories in Asia Minor. Eventually, the League freed almost all of the Greek cities under Persia's control. And here's our definition of an alliance if you're not sure what that is. An alliance is an agreement among a group of countries or city-states to protect and help each other. So if you're in an alliance, if someone attacks you, the people in your alliance group will come to your rescue and fight for you. But you're also required to fight and help them if someone attacks them. This map shows the allies of Athens and the allies of Sparta. You can see in yellow Athens and her allies, and in that orangish red color, Sparta and her allies. You can see it's pretty even, I suppose, with the amount of colors on there, but it seems as though Athens's allies are kind of spread out more. Like you can see that they've got a lot of allies over here in the Ionian Greek city-states along the coast of Asia Minor. The Delian League. At its start, the Delian League had headquarters on the island of Delos. However, its chief officials, the treasurers in charge of its money, and the commanders in charge of its fleet were from Athens, as were most of the troops. Little by little, Athens gained control over the other city-states in the alliance. Soon, the League was no longer a partnership to fight Persia, but an Athenian empire. In 454 BCE, the Athenians moved the Delian League's treasury from Delos to Athens. The Athenians also began sending troops to other Greek city-states to help the common people rebel against the nobles in power. War begins. As the Athenian Empire became rich and powerful, other city-states grew suspicious of its intentions. Led by Sparta, they joined forces against Athens. Sparta and Athens had built two very different kinds of societies, and neither state understood or trusted the other. The two groups clashed several times over what Sparta and its allies saw as Athenian aggression. Aggression is violent behavior that is happening. Finally, war broke out in 431 BCE. It would drag on until 404 BCE and shattered the possibility of future cooperation among the Greeks. Where did the name Peloponnesian come from? The word Peloponnesian comes from the name of the peninsula in southern Greece called the Peloponnese. This peninsula was home to many of the Greek city-states, including Sparta, Argos, Corinth, and Messene. So there it is in red. All right, let's answer some questions really quickly. Number one, what was the purpose of the Delian League? Why was it formed? And number two, what went wrong with the Delian League? Pericles' funeral oration. In the first winter of the war, the Athenians held a public funeral. Its purpose was to honor those who had died in the battle. The relatives of the dead wept for their loved ones. The rest of the citizens joined in a procession. An oration means a speech, and this is a very famous painting that depicts this funeral oration. As was the custom, a leading Athenian addressed the crowd. On this day, Pericles spoke. He talked about the greatness of Athens and reminded the people that they made their government strong. In this famous speech called the funeral oration, Pericles pointed out that Athenians were part of a community. As citizens, they agreed to obey the rules in their constitution, their framework of government. They accepted certain duties, such as paying taxes and defending the city. They also gained certain rights, such as the ability to vote and run for office. Pericles' speech reminded Athenians of the power of democracy and gave them the courage to keep fighting. Its ideas are still important to the people living in democratic nations today. What was the purpose of Pericles giving his famous funeral oration? Why do you think that he did this? Long walls around Athens. At the beginning of the war, both Sparta and Athens thought that they knew how to win. The Spartans and their allies surrounded Athens. They hoped the Athenians would send out an army to fight. However, Pericles knew that Spartan forces beat the Athenians in open battles. Believing his people would be safe behind the city walls, he urged farmers and others on the outskirts to move inside the city. There, Athenians stayed put and had the navy deliver supplies from their colonies and allies. Because Sparta did not have a navy, it could not attack the Athenian ships. All right, so what happens is here's the city of Athens. They built walls around Athens all the way down here to where their ports were, where the ships would come in this way. And that way they could unload the ships with supplies, bring it inside the city walls, and everyone was protected inside there. So that works for a while, but something goes wrong. A plague in the city. Athens escaped harm for some time. Then, in the second year of the war, a deadly disease spread through the overcrowded city. It killed more than a third of the people, including Pericles himself, in 429 BCE. And a plague is just any type of illness that's highly contagious and spreads very quickly. So because the people were in such close quarters inside the city here, the disease spread very fast. Despite these terrible losses, the Athenians fought on. The standoff continued another 25 years. The historian Thucydides recorded what he saw. Here's what he said. This, then, was the calamity which fell upon Athens, and the times were hard indeed, when men dying inside the city and the land outside being laid to waste. So here's some questions. Why did the Athenians build the long walls? And why didn't the long walls work? What went wrong? Desperate times. Finally, desperate to win, the Spartans made a deal with the Persian Empire. All right, so y'all, the Persian Empire they had just fought a war with, the Spartans make a deal with them. In exchange for enough money to build a navy, they gave the Persians some Greek territory in Asia Minor. In 405 BCE, Sparta's new navy destroyed the Athenian fleet. The next year, after losing more battles on land, Athens surrendered. The Spartans and their allies then tore down the city walls and broke up the Athenian Empire. The war was over at last. What drastic measure do the Spartans take in order to win the war? A lot of times I call this a shady deal that takes place. Who is it that they partner with in order to finally end this war? Consequences of the war. The Peloponnesian War weakened all the major Greek city-states, both the winners and the losers. Many people died in the fighting, and many farms were destroyed. Thousands of people were left without jobs. The war also made it impossible for the Greeks to unite and work together again. After defeating Athens, Sparta tried to rule all of Greece. Within 30 years, however, the city-states rebelled. Sparta fought Persia again and tried to maintain control of rebellious allies. While they were fighting amongst themselves, the Greeks failed to notice that to their north, the kingdom of Macedonia was growing in power. This would eventually cost them their freedom. Click the pause button to read through the cause of the Peloponnesian War, and hit pause again to read through the condensed version of what happened during the Peloponnesian War. Hit pause again to see the consequences of the Peloponnesian War here. Many people died, farms were destroyed, thousands of people were left without jobs, and Sparta became very powerful. Thanks for watching. See you in class.